Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard. We've got a really awesome episode for you today that is actually a follow up from one of the downloads that we shared with you a while back. And it is one of the coolest, most innovative, most interesting NIL deals that, frankly, we've seen in a while. So we wanted not just to tell you about it, but actually to bring the folks on the show who were part of making it happen. So, super happy to introduce you to Steve Hoffman and Kat Wren from ENG Organ Recovery. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of reveal what this NIL deal is and was and how it all came to be.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Cody, thanks for having us today. We are thrilled to be here. My name is Kat Wren. I am the Vice President of ENG Aviation Group and in ENG Organ Recovery. I come from a long background in aviation where I primarily worked on the FBO side, dabbled in some aircraft management and maintenance sales. But it was last summer when I had lunch with Steve, and I very quickly learned his passion for what we do, his passion for people, and the mission and purpose that we serve through ENG Organ Recovery.
And thanks for having me on today. I'm Steve Hoffman, founder and president of ENG Organ Recovery. I don't have a super extensive background in aviation, though I am a pilot and have a pretty non-linear career, but super passionate about helping people and helping create something bigger than any one individual. And really excited to be on the show.
Thank you so much, Kat and Steve. I alluded to earlier one of the coolest NIL deals that we've seen. And what that is you guys, ENG Organ Recovery and ENG Aviation, partnered with Marcel to be his champion and for him to become a champion of organ recovery, especially with the college football and just college athletics community in general. It's so unique and something we really had never seen, not just a brand sponsorship, but really bringing a mission sponsorship into college athletics in this way. It's unique in all of the spaces, and we want to know, how did this all come about? What was the synthesis of it, and what made it so appealing to you guys and to Marcel?
We're very mission oriented, and we provide air and ground transportation for transplant centers across the country to be able to procure and recover organs for transplant. Over 90% of the US population is in support of transplant, but less than 60% of the population is a registered donor. Every 8 to 10 seconds, there's another person that's added to the wait list. In addition to what we do day in and day out on the transportation side, we felt that we had a fiduciary duty to this community to help close that gap between the amount of people that support organ donation and transplantation and versus the registered donors, and increasing the amount of donations and donors could potentially remove the need for a wait list. And so in addition to what we do for our transplant centers and OPO partners, we wanted to help contribute in a way that was much bigger than what we could do with our aircraft. Early this year, Marcel and his team reached out to us to look for some sort of partnership to help Marcel get back to Nashville, where he's from. Late last year, in between, I think, their last practice and the Thanksgiving break, by the time Marcel left practice in College Station and got down to IAH in Houston, he missed his flight, and he was unable to get home and see his family for the holidays. And so him and his agent partnered to look for some sort of private aviation alternative. That way he'd be able to go home and see his family. And so when we were originally approached, I was not interested in the deal. Say what you want or have your own beliefs about NIL, and it's great in many ways, but to me there was a lot of gaps in how it was conducted. And so I flat out said, I'm not interested. And his agent basically said, well, what would you be interested in? And immediately I saw this moment to take a collegiate athlete, especially one that has such a breadth and platform, to really help us promote the importance of donation and transplant. And so I just candidly said, well, we're a very niche operation and we're very mission focused, and the only way I would be willing to entertain this conversation is if Marcel would be willing to help promote the importance of donation and transplant. And immediately it was a resounding yes. And how can he help, and how can we partner together to use his voice and his platform to spread awareness. And so that's kind of how the deal started.
What was that timeline like, Steve? Was it, is this over weeks, months? When that initial outreach and you were like, no, like, what was that timeline like?
It was about 2 or 3 days
Okay.
before he could get back to Marcel, and in all capital letters over an email said, Marcel is super excited, and this was way better than he could have ever imagined. And I think was pretty taken aback at not only an opportunity to solve a challenge that he had in terms of transportation, but to play an important role in this overall mission that we're all focused on.
And what was that initial feedback of no? Obviously, had a lot to do with kind of the NIL environment. Had y'all looked at sports as a vehicle for driving awareness and mission for y'all before?
No, not really. And we weren't the first private aviation entity to partner with collegiate athlete, but we had never really looked at it from the lens of, how could we make this bigger than what E&G is, or what collegiate football is. And this was just kind of that moment where the light bulb went off and said, we could really change the way that these are done and use somebody that has that amount of reach to be that voice that we just don't have. And so it just kind of naturally evolved from needing to get home to Nashville to how can we, drive awareness and promote donation and transplant.
And it sounds like Marcel didn't necessarily have a connection to organ donation beforehand, but talking to you guys, it became something that he's really invested in now.
Very much so. We have been able to spend a lot of time with Marcel and just seeing how genuine and grounded he is for being, a star athlete at a very large school has been incredible. We recently did a meet and greet at one of our largest hospitals down in Houston. We paired with the Transplant Center and the Organ Procurement Organization for that region, and he did a special guest appearance. To say that this was a powerful meeting is an understatement. There was a room full of 40 people that made up donor families and transplant recipients, and they had a front row seat to meet somebody not only in the limelight, but educate Marcel about the back end and some of the stats of organ transplant. There were some powerful stories that were shared, but I think one that really resonated with him was a young athlete himself who was a heart recipient. He was in the audience. This young gentleman his family's from Uganda. They came over when he was very young. He had one goal of playing college football, and he wanted to play at UT. He worked his butt off, got to that level, got recruited, and his dreams came true. But it was his freshman year when he was in the weight room where he knew something was wrong. He felt something was wrong. He has multiple doctor's appointments and ends up being diagnosed with a disease where he had to have a heart transplant. And as you can imagine, this kid's world is crumbling. Luckily, he was not on the wait list very long. And so a freshman in college getting this transplant from a donor who had a tragic accident in Louisiana. And so when you see Peter and Jack sitting in this room and Marcel sitting right next to Jack, who was the donor dad of this young son who ended up unfortunately losing his life, the words that were shared, the handshakes, the just the camaraderie between them. Jack even said, even though he lost a son, he didn't know he'd be gaining one. And we're all in tears. And as you can imagine, when it was Marcel's turn, as we were going around the table to talk, he's a little choked up because he's seeing firsthand something that's so relatable to him and somebody that's close to his age going through such a journey, and being able to meet the transplant surgeons and some of the staff that were able to help Peter along the way was pretty incredible. And, as you mentioned, Amy, he was honest with us to begin with and said that he hadn't been really touched by donation. But as he sat there, he said right before this meeting, he spoke with both of his parents about signing up to be an organ donor. So as you can imagine, powerful morning.
Super powerful. Yeah, just being in the room and hearing the stories and feeling the connections, not just hearing somebody else talk about it, but actually being there. That's what that's kind of about.
And as emotional as it was also fun to see them give each other a little grief with the AMU rivalry and, Peter had a UT shirt on, and then Marcel, he had a ENG, but he quickly took it off to get some pictures. He had an A&M shirt on under, so it was cool. They swapped numbers, and that's a relationship that's going to stay forever, right? And they're going to be able to lean on each other, and just for us to be the
Yeah.
connector of that, it just felt so good.
Well, and that seems, Kat, it just seems like that's the scalable opportunity, right? It's like be able to make those connections around mission, because the work that y'all are doing, it touches people's lives, but touches strangers, right? And like communities come together based off of the work y'all are doing, and Marcel being able to amplify that work. So that I imagine those conversations happen quite a bit in y'all's world, right? But being able to provide this amplification of those stories sounds like such an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and that's part of the goal, or one of the many goals with this partnership, is to really have him on his platform being an advocate for donation and understanding the stats and the needs, and just being able to be a shining light to make people, maybe they don't sign up, but they start asking questions and start trying to knock down some of those myths that are constantly thrown around through the community.
Speaking of the myths and the education piece of this, Cody and I did not know a lot about what happens behind closed doors, behind closed car doors, hospital doors, airplane doors before we met and started talking to you. Can you share a little bit about what that process is like and how ENG plays a role in that with all of the different moving parts and pieces that happen in the organ recovery process?
Yeah, so I mean, you nailed it on the head, right? There's a ton of moving parts and moving pieces and a lot of complexity involved, and we're just a very, very small part of that process. I always, joke with our team. I say if donation and transplant is a pepperoni pizza, we might just be a couple pepperonis, but without us, it's a cheese pizza. And so, typically, what happens is all throughout the country, there's organizations called an OPO, or an organ procurement organization, that are responsible for distributing, donors' organs to the various transplant centers across the country. And if the OPO, through the selfless gift of an organ donor, has a match with one of the transplant center's recipients, that starts sort of this domino effect of all the logistics and coordination involved in performing the transplant. First and foremost, it starts with getting the recipient, to the hospital and prepped for surgery, securing the OR and the staff, right, the surgeons needed, and the first techs and the perfusionists, and all those medical professionals that are involved. It starts working with the local blood bank to make sure they have the right blood and quantities for the recipient during the surgery, and the local pharmacy so they have the correct medicines and things like that. But then there's a big logistic component to it, which is where we come in. So several years ago, the way organs were allocated changed to allow transplant centers to be able to go further and further out from where they were located to be able to secure organs for the folks on their wait list. And that's been great for the transplant centers and great for the recipients, because now they have access to a broader amount of potential donors. But it's created a big logistical challenge. And how does a team from Houston get to Buffalo, New York, or Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, or wherever in the country that they've been a match, with an organ donor? And so enter ENG. We provide air and ground transportation, not only to and from the hospital from the airport, but also our crews fly them to wherever the destination is where that donor is located. They'll procure or recover whatever organ they've been assigned, fly it back in that time sort of critical nature, right? Because every organ has a limited amount of time it can be out of the body, and then bring it back to the destination to perform the transplant. So a lot of this happens in a matter of hours, and it's got to be in the right order in the right time. It definitely creates some complexity, but everybody in this community that we work with is incredible stewards to the mission that we all serve. And at the end of the day, making sure that the donor family can take some of that grief and turn it into hope, knowing that their loved one's lungs can breathe in someone else's chest, or their heart continues to beat in someone else's chest. And then the recipient families, giving those folks who maybe drew a bad card in life and needed a transplant, that they're going to get another shot at life.
Yeah, that's incredibly complex. And it makes me wonder, so you mentioned that you work both with ground transportation and aviation as well. Do you own this massive fleet, or where do you get all the vehicles and the assets from?
Yeah, so we own all the ground vehicles. Our aviation fleet is a mix of aircraft that we own, and then we are fortunate enough to have aircraft owners that see the value in providing their aircraft for organ transplant when they're not using it. And so, to those selfless individuals, you're not flying 24/7, and so when their airplane, it's not being used by them, they allow us to use it to essentially increase the capacity of the amount of trips that we can support for the hospitals. And so it's sort of a mix of 50-50. But again, airplanes are inelastic assets, right? So they can only be at one place at one time. And so having these aircraft owners who are able to, let us, or willing to let us use their aircraft to increase the number of support that we can provide the transplant centers has been fantastic. And again, it all just goes to that mission of helping the hospitals increase the percentage of organs that they can accept, because now they can get to that destination in the time that they need to.
It sounds like y'all are in this kind of growth trajectory right now. Where does the Marcel deal fall into that? Like what other fun, interesting, innovative ways are y'all thinking about your own marketing and your own growth?
It's been incredible to see, once the press release went out, how many folks have reached out naturally through us being associated with Marcel. We're actually talking to a current aircraft owner that he saw the press release. He said, "Wait, what do you do? Let's meet." And he's ready to purchase an aircraft to put on for our mission.
That's unreal.
So, again, going back to one of our many goals with this partnership is to just amplify our message. We at ENG have very big goals of growth. We essentially want to be the easy button for the entire transplant community, across the US. When you think about the number of organs that were transplanted last year, which was just over 48,000, that's a lot. Now, the Organ Procurement Transplantation Network, we call it the OPTN, they've got a goal of over 60,000 by 2026. We're going to need more airplanes that are in this niche, that know the vernacular, that know the in and outs, know the time sensitive nature that we're serving, to be able to do this and do it well and be reliable. And so with that, one of our goals is for aircraft owners to know what we do, and flying private and getting to and from business meetings and going to Cabo with your family. That is why business aviation started, and that's why it exists. But this is just a very niche part of the industry that we want people to understand and know more of. So I think that's another big piece of the goal.
And again, this is not just a business for us. There's an absolute personal mission with this. My father passed away when I was 12 and was an organ donor, and that was sort of my first exposure to donation and transplant. And so part of our extreme focus on this mission is just because we have been touched by it personally, and folks that we know have been touched by it. It seems like almost everyone we talk to has had some sort of experience or been affected by it. Kat and I were recently down in College Station doing an interview with the local news down there, and the reporter conducting the interview had two family members that were transplant recipients, and it's just that type of connection, like you mentioned earlier, that you could just never anticipate, but it just makes you know that we're doing the right thing, and we're helping people in a way that we could never do individually or single-handedly, thanks to the partnership with Marcel. We also partner with other organizations like the OPOs, the organ procurement organizations, the transplant centers, but then there's other entities like SODA, which is the Student Organ Donation Association. And this is an entity that partners with local chapters at high schools and universities to educate a younger generation going through high school and colleges to, again, just spread that awareness. And so there's so many different entities involved that are here for the right mission, and we just are again a one pepperoni on that pizza, but just anybody who understands the need and how we can solve this problem nationally is a great thing. And like I said, working with some of these aircraft owners who enable us to provide this support for the hospitals is just a win-win-win all around.
Yeah, it just seems like so many aha moments that y'all are able to provide, right? Like Kat just mentioning, someone read a press release and was immediately like, "Wait, I can do that? Like that's an option." because it's y'all say niche. I think it's just high impact, right? It's high impact in which folks really haven't understood, and being able to help create awareness through the NIL partnership with Marcel just seems like such a natural fit that is, and this is why we loved it. And when we read this story, we fell in love with it because it's innovating the amount of impact you can make, right? And hearing the numbers, right? 90% of folks want to be organ donors or support organ donation, right? And then these aggressive goals of getting to 60,000 organ transplants a year. Those are high impact. Those are lives, and that's what we fell in love with about this. But it's the storytelling part. There's so many stories that come out of this that, like, how can you not get behind this? So we're super excited about that, and to see where else this is going. So I guess that's the question: like, where is this going next?
I'll be very transparent. When we first were talking with Marcel and his agent, this was not like, oh, this could be the greatest NIL deal. That never crossed our mind. That was certainly an ancillary benefit, but we were really just focused on how can we spread awareness and get the word out, right? When there's a million different streaming platforms and social media platforms and everybody's garnering for your attention, what could we do to stand out to educate and squash any misinformation around donation, and all the other things that sort of came out of that was just icing on the cake. But again, in the way that this sort of spread like wildfire, the American Heart Association reached out to us via the Bear Bryant Awards, and we'll have a fun announcement coming in the next few weeks about how we're going to support and partner with the Bear Bryant Awards. Obviously, the American Heart Association has a lot of vested interest in making sure that we provide research and support for families that have heart conditions or heart diseases and things like that. And so you just kind of never know where this is going to take off into, and we're here for it every step of the way. And certainly we can't be everything to everybody, but we're really passionate about this. And like Kat said, just some of the events that we've hosted or been a part of or have been invited to see it in real life and really learn about what goes on behind the scenes, both from the donor side and the recipient side. It's something that you just makes you proud to get out of bed every single day and go to work.
Yeah. I imagine there are going to be more people reaching out to you based on the press releases. And you mentioned you just were down for a TV interview with a local station. If folks see this and they say, I want to get involved, how can they? What are some options for them to either support ENG or get involved with organ donation? What does that look like?
We don't want to say no to anyone. So you get a hold of us and we figure out how to partner. I will say this would not have worked with any athlete. I think Marcel, his genuine nature, he's so grounded, and those roots run deep, in College Station, and there's a lot of the 12th man fandom behind him. But somebody who's so grounded in his faith and his family, we just knew early on it had to be, a two-way street with the partnership, and he has done a fantastic job.
Yeah, our team is available 24/7. And if it's not with ENG, right, there's so many stakeholders in this community that we can point you in the right direction or figure out a creative way to get involved. And like I said, there's tens of thousands of transplant professionals all across the country that do this mission day in and day out. And it's not about ENG single-handedly, right? There's a whole slew of people from the coordinator side to the surgeon side to the transplant centers and the OPOs and the pilots, all those folks across the industry, across all the states who are involved. And we'd be remiss to not just say how grateful we are and thankful for their dedication to this mission as well. We just happen to have a unique way of getting the voice out.
Yeah, truly unique. We're excited just to be able to help y'all tell this story and to amplify it further. I want to thank Steve Kat from ENG Organ Recovery for joining us today. This was fantastic. We can't wait to continue telling this story as well about all the great work that's going to be happening, not just because of the deal with Marcel, but it sounds like y'all have got some really interesting partnerships and innovations coming down the pipeline, and continuing this thread of how sports can really create that level of social impact that's needed. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you both for having us.